So today I'm going to be addressing a topic that I get a lot of questions about, and that is, will blanking my EGR make my Ford Ranger run hotter? Now, I just want to say from the start, I believe that is total misinformation. I don't know where people get this information from. I have seen a couple of videos on YouTube that say this, which I totally disagree with, and today I'm going to explain why I disagree with it, and I'm going to show you some real-world testing that I've done on my Ford Ranger with the EGR percentage values to give you a perspective of what the EGR valve is actually doing in real-world driving conditions. So the basic reason why an EGR system is there on a modern diesel is to reduce the nitrogen oxide that is being emitted by the engine. Obviously to help with reducing emissions, and governments make car manufacturers put these systems on so it's cleaner for the environment. Whether or not it's actually better for the environment, it's debatable. I've done a few videos that cover this topic, so you can actually go check them out, and I'll see if I can throw a link in the description. But anyway, all it is hot exhaust gases which come from your exhaust, travel through an EGR cooler along the back, get cooled, maybe 150, 200 degrees, and then they are pumped into the intake system, which goes down there and mixes with the cool fresh air that's coming in through here, and then goes into your engine. Apparently what that's meant to do is reduce combustion temperatures. How it does that remains a mystery to me, because under high load conditions, when your engine's working the hardest, the EGR valve is actually closed. And the only time that it's really open is when you're sort of putting around town, maybe like 50, 60 k's per hour, when there's no real load on the engine. They're the only times when the EGR valve is actually open and functioning. Anything more than 30% of accelerator, the EGR valve is actually closed. And what I might do now, I might actually jump to a video that I made so you can actually see the way the EGR valve operates in normal driving conditions. So let's go to that video now. So I've got my EGR valve position synced up with my car here. And essentially I've chosen this section of road because it's going to be a good demonstration of a flat section, a downhill section, and a really steep, long uphill section. And it's going to give us a great indication of what the EGR valve does under different load conditions. When you see all the blue on the screen, essentially what that means is the engine is allowing the EGR valve to pretty much operate at opening. So we've got 57% there, and that's giving us an indication that the EGR valve is 57% open. When it goes down to 0, or what the minimum value is, I think it might be like 10%, that's when it's fully closed. So when you see a lot of blue, it means there's a lot of soot coming in. When you see a lot of white, that's when the EGR valve is closed. So at the moment, we can see that the EGR valve is fully closed. I'm just accelerating to get onto the freeway, and we've got no EGR gases coming into the motor at this stage. So highway cruising now, we can see there's not much load on the engine, and we're about 60% EGR. So now we're at a downhill section, so I'm just coasting down the hill in gear, about to hit the really steep uphill section. up on the really steep uphill section, and this is where you'd normally see high exhaust gas temps. This is where I used to see it when I tow trailers, especially something with around 2 ton weight on it. And as you can see, our EGR valve is completely closed at this stage. So this section of road now is pretty much suburbia. We're going to be cruising at around sort of 50, 60 k's per hour here. And in this scenario, I expect the EGR valve to be basically open all the time. So just to go over a few points in that video, as you could see, when I was standing there idling, the EGR valve was pretty much fully open. If I wasn't running a blanking plate, which I am, I would have had gases coming through the intake manifold when the car is sitting there idling, when there's absolutely no load on the engine. When I took off and started driving, we could see that the EGR valve remained pretty much closed all the way while I was accelerating till I got onto the highway and onto highway speed. When I was at highway speed, when I had about 25% throttle, that's when we could see that the EGR valve, then it opened up and I was cruising on a highway with the EGR open. As soon as I started going down the hill and I backed off the throttle, the EGR valve closed. And then once I started climbing again, the EGR remained closed all the way up through the climb until I got to a steady pace at about 100 k's, then it opened up again. When I got into the urban areas, we could see then that the EGR valve pretty much remained open all the time unless I was sort of downshifting or upshifting. We could see little breaks where it would come on and off. But all in all, 50k, 60k cruising, the EGR valve pretty much remained open all the time. And we've got to realize that during those periods, there is hardly any load on the engine. You're basically just cruising around, not really doing much, and that's when the EGR valve is in full operation. So my advice to the people that think if you blank your EGR, the engine's going to run hot is, if the engine from the factory is programmed to run on nothing but cool fresh air under high load conditions when the EGR valve is closed by the factory programming, well then it's not going to have any problems running on the same cool fresh air under low load conditions if you put a blanking plate in. I hope that makes sense.